Review it.
Holy shit.
Review it.
Okay, I mean, I was already going to. I mean, I just reviewed the previous 8 live-action Spider-Man movies, and I was kind of doing a series leading up to reviewing Brand New Day. Like, was that necessary?
Oh.
What a dick. Spider-Man Brand New Day was directed by Destin Cretton, and this happens to be the 4th solo Tom Holland Spider-Man film. This time, picking up several years after Spider-Man No Way Home, Peter finds himself in a very lonely place in life while dealing with a lot of these street-level threats. Meanwhile, a mysterious new enemy emerges, who happens to know more about Peter Parker than anyone else in the world. I was mildly looking forward to this movie, even though I'm not a huge MCU fan. First 2 Tom Holland Spider-Man movies I don't really care for, though I do really love Spider-Man No Way Home. The advertising for Brand New Day didn't look super great to me, but nonetheless, hey, it's a Spider-Man movie. I'll totally go see it. And Brand New Day was actually a lot better than I was expecting from the advertising setup. As I alluded to in the synopsis, this is a much more small street-level Spider-Man story. This is not trying to reach the grand heights of Spider-Man No Way Home or some of the previous Spider-Man films as well, but is more just trying to take a personal look at Peter as a character. You really feel for his emotional struggles throughout this movie because of the sacrifices he had to make at the end of No Way Home. And once we throw in these all new conflicts that this version of Peter hasn't dealt with before, we sort of see him go through an internal crisis, I would say somewhat similar to the journey we saw him go on in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2. Never a bad thing to be compared to Spider-Man 2, by the way. There's also the inclusion of several other MCU characters such as the Hulk and now the Punisher as well. In the past, I've complained that I sort of have an issue with all the MCU movies being so interconnected to the point where it seems like you have to follow each and every one to make sense of what's happening in some of the smaller movies. That's not the case here. I actually think this is a really great way to utilize other Marvel characters in an effective way that felt earned for this story. This isn't really a spoiler since it was shown in the trailer, but we're back to a pure rage monster Hulk, which was so awesome to see after so long. And the Punisher was actually in this movie far more than I was expecting. I haven't seen the Punisher Netflix series, nor have I seen that Disney Plus special that came out recently, but I felt like his inclusion in this movie felt very in line with how I've seen the Punisher pop up in certain Marvel comics as a side character. He's just this total unhinged lunatic throughout that still has a heart of gold at times, but I thought the way they utilized Frank Castle in this movie was largely for comedic relief, but in a way that I thought really worked. I thought he was really funny. Although a couple of the jokes fell flat, I would say largely the comic relief in this film is not super distracting from the plot. In fact, this is a much darker, more serious tone than the other Tom Holland Spider-Man movies, and I'd say the vast majority of the MCU. This film really takes the time to allow itself to be serious and to get into the interpersonal character drama going on. And while I would say the dialogue scenes aren't super extraordinarily directed, a lot of it is just shot very flat, shot reverse shot. Same way I think we see a lot of other MCU entry shots. Whenever it's not just exposition and more just emotional character work, I'd say the minimalist style actually kind of services it decently. There's even a few parts where they just kind of kill the musical score entirely and just let these actors perform, and that was really effective. Though that doesn't necessarily excuse the fact, even though I do really like Tom Holland's Spider-Man in this movie, he's had enough history and baggage at this point to where I find him to be a really interesting Spider-Man now. And I was following him along and caring about him and his plight on this journey. I'd say for the first half of the movie, the plot and story itself isn't super interesting. There is a point around the halfway mark of this movie where things sort of shift into more of an emotional gear. And I'd say from that point forward, I was a bit more invested in what was happening narratively. Still, this movie is a bit too long. I do think the third act especially runs on, and there are moments of the movie where I was sort of waiting for plot lines to get wrapped up because I could see where they were going. But nonetheless, of all the Spider-Man movies, I'd say that this one feels the closest to the tone of a Marvel comic. I am by no means a prolific Spider-Man comic guru. I've read like maybe 15 to 20 Spider-Man comics in my life, and we're talking like individual issues here, but I've read a decent amount of Marvel comics generally speaking, and Spider-Man Brand New Day feels the most like you just pick up a random Marvel comic and start reading it. I think whereas the dialogue scenes don't have a ton of energy into the direction, I do actually think the action is really well shot. There's a lot more in-camera stunt work going on than we've seen in previous Spider-Man movies, and even when things are entirely CG, we're at least doing creative things action-wise. I like Spider-Man Brand New Day far, far more than Homecoming and Far From Home. I think even though the writing here is more consistent and competent than what was on display in Spider-Man No Way Home, that film still just hits such higher heights, emotionally speaking, and there's kind of an unfair bias there. It had like all three Spider-Men, and really felt like that movie was specifically the payoff of this entire franchise, whereas this is just more of a fresh start. Despite it so obviously still being a continuation of the previous Tom Holland films, this is clearly a new era and tonally just so distinct from the rest of them. And frankly, I was really happy and satisfied with what it did. Spider-Man Brand New Day is certainly one of the better Spider-Man movies out there, and I'm gonna give it a solid 7 out of 10. So now that I've officially reviewed all 9 live-action Spidey films, here's my ranking of all of them really quick, in case you were wondering. Also, maybe follow my letterbox at Nightmare Room. Hope you enjoyed all my Spidey reviews, and even if you only just watched this one, still, thanks for watching, guys. Hope you have a good one.